Imagine traveling deep into the world's largest rainforest, flying over endless rivers, endless trees, thousands of miles away from major cities, and then you see this, a massive World Cup stadium right in the middle of the Amazon. It sounds impossible. Yet in 2014, some of the world's greatest football players came here, to Manaus, a city that many people around the world had never even heard of. So why did FIFA choose a city surrounded by rainforest? And what happened after the world left? When FIFA announced that Manaus would host matches during the 2014 World Cup, many people were confused. Some journalists questioned the decision. Some fans couldn't believe it. Others wondered if players could even handle the heat. After all, Manaus is not Rio de Janeiro. It's not São Paulo. It's not Brasilia. Manaus sits in the heart of the Amazon rainforest, one of the most remote and fascinating regions on Earth. So why bring the world's biggest sporting event here? To answer that question, first, we need to understand Manaus itself. Most foreigners imagine the Amazon as a place of untouched wilderness, a land of rivers, wildlife, and dense rainforest. And while that image is partly true, there's something many people don't realize. Deep inside the Amazon stands a city of more than 2 million people. Manaus, the capital of Brazil's Amazonas state. A city so isolated that roads connect it to very few major urban centers. Yet despite its isolation, Manaus became one of the most important cities in South America. During the rubber boom of the late 19th century, immense wealth flowed into the city. Mansions were built. European architecture appeared in the middle of the rainforest, and symbols of that era still remain today. But Manaus is more than its history. Today, it serves as the main gateway to the Amazon. Every year, travelers from all over the world arrive here, looking for adventure, wildlife, indigenous culture, unique food, and experiences found nowhere else on Earth. Which makes the next question even more interesting. If Manaus was already famous for the Amazon, why did it need a World Cup stadium? In 2007, Brazil was officially chosen to host the 2014 FIFA World Cup. Almost immediately, discussions began about which cities would welcome the tournament. Most people expected the obvious choices: Rio de Janeiro, São Paulo, Belo Horizonte, Porto Alegre. But then came a surprise: Manaus, a city surrounded by rainforest, thousands of kilometers away from many of Brazil's largest population centers. For FIFA and Brazilian organizers, however, the decision wasn't only about football, it was about representation. Brazil is much more than its beaches and famous cities, and the Amazon is one of the country's most important symbols. Bringing the World Cup to Manaus meant bringing the world's attention to a region many people knew very little about. But there was one major challenge. Manaus needed a stadium worthy of the World Cup. To host World Cup matches, Manaus needed something extraordinary. The result was the Arena da Amazônia, a modern stadium with a design inspired by one of the region's greatest treasures, the rainforest. Its external structure was designed to resemble woven indigenous baskets. Blending modern architecture with Amazonian identity, building such a structure in Manaus was far from easy. Materials had to travel long distances, logistics were complex, costs increased, and critics questioned whether the project was worth it. Yet as construction progressed, the stadium became one of the most recognizable landmarks in the city, a symbol of an unusual idea, bringing the world's biggest sporting event into the heart of the Amazon. But while the stadium was taking shape, another concern began attracting international attention: the weather. Manaus is hot. Very hot. Temperatures often exceed 30 degrees Celsius. Humidity levels can be intense. For athletes accustomed to cooler climates, the conditions were challenging. Before the tournament even began, journalists around the world questioned how players would perform. Could elite athletes handle 90 minutes in the Amazon? As the opening matches approached, the world was about to find out. When fans arrived in Manaus for the World Cup, many expected football. What they didn't expect was the Amazon itself. For many visitors, this was their first encounter with the world's largest rainforest. Beyond the stadium, an entirely different world was waiting. Vast rivers stretching beyond the horizon, exotic fruits found nowhere else, pink river dolphins, indigenous traditions, and a culture unlike any other in Brazil. Some visitors came for a match, but left with memories of the Amazon. Because in Manaus, football was only part of the experience. Like many World Cup stadiums around the world, the Arena da Amazônia faced criticism after the tournament. Some questioned its costs, others questioned its future. But over time, the stadium became more than a World Cup venue. Today, it hosts football matches, concerts, cultural events, and major gatherings. It remains one of the most recognizable landmarks in Manaus, a reminder of a moment when the eyes of the world turned toward the Amazon. More than a decade has passed since the World Cup. The matches are over, the headlines have faded, but Manaus remains. And so does the Amazon. Every year, travelers continue arriving from every corner of the world, not because of football, but because there are very few places left on Earth that feel this unique. A city surrounded by rainforest, ancient rivers, extraordinary wildlife, remarkable food, and experiences impossible to recreate anywhere else. The World Cup introduced Manaus to millions, but the Amazon is what keeps people coming back. So, why is there a World Cup stadium in the middle of the Amazon? Because for one brief moment, the world's biggest sporting event came to one of the world's most extraordinary places. And while the tournament eventually moved on, Manaus never stopped being remarkable. If you enjoyed this journey through the Amazon, don't forget to subscribe, because there are many more stories hidden in the rainforest, and we're just getting started.